Russell Baxter, NFL Network contributor, also covers the NFL rights for NFL Spin Zone, joining us on the show today. Russell, how you doing?
I'm good, Josh. What's going on?
Russell, I'm excited. It's football season. It feels like football weather down here in South Jersey, and you know what? I got college football on the TV in the studio. We got the NFL tomorrow. It's a good time, right?
Absolutely. We got the NFL season off to a wild start Thursday night up in Foxborough. We've got the NFC East tomorrow, head-to-head in both matchups. The time has come. I think people get anxious with the preseason, and then in a week they complain about the preseason because apparently the preseason is the only time where players get hurt. They never get hurt in OTAs or training camp, and that's a story for a different time. But in any case, now the games count for real, and, the one thing you shouldn't be surprised about this year is being surprised.
Right. Well, speaking of surprises, you mentioned Thursday night the Chiefs beat the Patriots. And I think, obviously, there's overreaction all the time by fans on both sides of any win or loss. But we overlooked that. I was going back. I believe it's in the last 65 games you go for the Patriots. There's only one team that has scored over 40 points against them, and that is the Chiefs in the regular season. So it's not like this is some bad, this is some horrible omen. Maybe it's just that Andy Reid and the Chiefs have a good strategy against the Patriots right now.
Yeah, unfortunately for Andy Reid, he didn't have that good strategy about 13 years ago when he faced the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And as you will recall, I'm sure,
yes,
Andy got his share of criticism late in that game for that, call it what you will, lack of urgency. When they were down. I mean, the final score was 24-21, but he received his share of criticism. The other night, the Kansas City Chiefs looked like a healthier and faster team. And how's this for? I love to have fun with numbers. I've kind of cut my teeth on numbers, doing everything I've done in my career and so on. And I always like to have fun with numbers. And this one's kind of funny to me. There's so much made, and as you could see at the stadium Thursday night, Josh, the Patriots scoreboard, which during the pregame show said Atlanta 28, New England 3. I'm not making that up, correct?
Right.
Yes. Okay. So obviously the 25-point comeback was the biggest in Super Bowl history. It's one of the biggest in postseason history. And it's something that we've been hearing about in a good way for the New England fans and in a bad way for the Falcon fans ever since that February afternoon. But isn't it kind of interesting that New England, and this kind of gets lost in everything that happened the other night, New England was up by 10 in this game.
Right.
And they lost by 15, correct?
Yes, they did.
And even with my high school education, I know that 10 and 15 adds up to 25.
Right. It's a vicious circle, is it not?
Yeah, well, like I said, fun with numbers. What does it mean? It means Kansas City won a game and New England lost a game, and that's that. And, you're right, overreaction in all regards. And to me, the funniest thing coming out of the whole thing is I watched a football team give up 42 points and 537 total yards, and by some crazy imagination of some people, it's all Tom Brady's fault.
Right. The other thing is that we overlooked the fact that the Patriots defense in that game, they got a lot of things to fix up. They did not look very athletic. They didn't look explosive. They added Stephon Gilmore. He didn't look that great that night. Tom Brady's only one guy. There's a reason why football is the ultimate team sport, Russell.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why when I hear, some of my media brethren with Tom Brady beat this team, Tom Brady beat that team, Tom Brady lost to this team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's almost mind-numbing. But here's the thing. And when I was doing some previews this year, the Patriots do have an area of concern. And they tried to address it in the offseason, and it didn't work out. And then a series of circumstances. I don't care how good your corners are in this day and age. You've got to have some sort of substantial pass rush to back it up. Now,
absolutely.
In 2015, the New England Patriots, they didn't win the Super Bowl. They didn't get to the Super Bowl. They came up a game short, but their defense put 49 sacks on the board. That number tumbled to 34 last year. And yeah, it showed you even in the Super Bowl where they got 5 sacks of Matt Ryan. Now, don't get me wrong, they got a very crucial sack of Matt Ryan in that game. But it was the area that Bill Belichick was concerned with. He did a lot of wheeling and dealing. He dealt for Coney Ealy from the Carolina Panthers.
Yep.
Gave up draft choices, didn't make the team. He's now with the New York Jets. I believe the young man's name is Derek Rivers, which is with their first pick in the 3rd round, pass rusher, hurt his knee, out for the season. So regardless, now, don't get me wrong, the Tyreek Hill touchdown the other night was obviously a blown coverage. And then they had some linebackers go down, and they tried to cover Kareem Hunt with a linebacker, and just a beautiful throw by Alex Smith. But by the end of the night, 537 total yards is 537 total yards.
Yep.
Okay? That's a lot of yards, most ever by a Belichick team, most point, whatever, however you want to spin it. But that, to me, was the concern going in. And the fact that they squandered the 10-point lead at home because Kansas City stuck with its ground game, it was a great game plan. And, people talk about New England's offensive line. I got some great insight on the NFL Network this week about how and you remember early in the game, Josh, they weren't getting any heat on Tom Brady at all. I mean, Tom Brady stopped by the snack bar and grabbed, a soda,
right,
on one play. And as I found out, according to coaches, and NFL Network, that was by design. They wanted to save their pass rush for later in the game. So it was some great coach. You don't see Bill Belichick get out-coached a lot, but I think to a degree, he got out-coached. And certainly with the injuries the other night and some bad ones, they got outmanned as well.
We're talking with Russell Baxter. You can follow him on Twitter at Bax Football Guru. NFL Network contributor, also writes for NFL Spin Zone. Russell, in our backyard, you mentioned the NFC East teams matching up, and you talk about, I've seen you talk about online and in different articles about the fact that Kirk Cousins, he's played really well against the Eagles, but to me, there's a caveat with that, which is that was with Pierre Garçon and Deshaun Jackson. This year, he's got Terrell Pryor, who he's still developing chemistry with. We know that Jamison Crowder is questionable. Josh Doxson, we still don't fully know what we're going to get from him yet. We know Jordan Reed is really good when he's healthy. So what do you expect to see from Kirk Cousins tomorrow?
Well, I think, obviously, him and Terrell Pryor did develop a lot of rapport during the offseason and training camp. And one of the things, I read Kirk Cousins talking about, as well a little from Terrell Pryor, Josh, is the fact that, Terrell's background as a quarterback has made the transition between these two men a lot easier. Now, you're now going to be going on the field against Jim Schwartz's defense. And Jim Schwartz and the Eagles have, well, Josh, I don't know. Did you get a call to play corner this year for the Birds?
No, I didn't, but I'm also too slow.
That's okay. I mean, listen, North Carolina used to have the 4 corners offense under Dean Smith in college basketball.
Right.
They brought in so many corners in Philadelphia, it's like an isosceles triangle. And I love the Ronald Darby pickup. They went out and got Dexter McDougal as well. So obviously an area of concern. Safety, no concern. What a great tandem that the Eagles have and so on. So, yeah, but on the other hand, and in the piece I did mention Pryor and Brian Quick. Well, he's been, I don't know how much of a factor he's really been, and he comes off a career year from the Rams. But there's still Vernon Davis, and there's still Jordan Reed, and there's still the ability to throw the ball out of the backfield to a guy who doesn't get a lot of attention, Josh, and that's Chris Thompson. We talk about the Redskins running game. He's very, very versatile. They use him on returns. He can run the ball. He can catch. So, they're going to test Philly's linebackers as well with all 3 of those guys. I think down the road, there'll obviously be a little more rapport with the new receivers and so on. And don't underestimate Jamison Crowder, who last year led the team in touchdown receptions. So we shall see. They're just interesting numbers. 63.6 completion percentage in 5 games, 1,479 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3 picks. I think the thing that stands out to me also with the numbers, and it's in 5 meetings, and again, they're just numbers. Sacked only 4 times in those 5 games, Josh, and no lost fumbles. In fact, he's only fumbled once, and they got the ball back in 5 games against the Eagles.
It's funny you bring that up because I heard you were talking about the Patriots in their pass rush. The Eagles upgraded their defensive line. They brought in Tim Jernigan. They drafted Derek Barnett. And I really like what I've seen from both of them during their pass before they coming to the Eagles and what you saw from them in the preseason. I think that, to me, one of the biggest issues in this game is going to be in the trenches. That Eagles defensive line versus a very underrated Redskins offensive line.
No doubt about it. I've always liked Timmy Jernigan. And this is, and you'll see this piece later, sometime tonight. With the exception of the Giants, Josh, every team in the NFC East drafted a defensive end in the first round. Jonathan Allen, who the Redskins are obviously very excited about, Derek Barnett, as you mentioned, Taco Charlton for the Dallas Cowboys as well. Only the Giants went offense. They went Evan Ingram, the tight end from Ole Miss. But then again, when you have Olivier Vernon and Jason Pierre-Paul, you're not exactly, scrounging for a defensive end in the first round. But in any case, you have to be excited about what you've seen from Barnett. And then, when you've got guys like Jernigan and Fletcher Cox and what Barnett could do, and you pair him with Jim Schwartz, who's as aggressive a defensive coordinator as there is, and his 4-3 schemes, you go back when he was a defensive coordinator with the Buffalo Bills in 2014, 54 sacks. I think they were 4th overall in total defense, pretty solid against the run. And, then Rex Ryan came in and kind of dismantled the whole thing, which is why I'm kind of excited about Buffalo's defense, because Sean McDermott is a 4-3 guy. If you got the 4-3 personnel, you go with the 4-3. I like Chris Long in reserve, and so I loved a lot of what the Philadelphia Eagles did this offseason. And that's why, to jump ahead here, I'm bigger on the Redskins and the Eagles in the NFC East than a lot of people are. Everybody kind of seems it's going to be coming down to Dallas and the Giants, and the Skins and the Eagles almost get lost in the backwash.
Well, yeah, Russell, I'm glad you brought that up, because I've been saying for a while now, I remember when ESPN brought their FPI projections and saying the Cowboys are, 46%, I believe, most likely to win the division, which I think is insane, because the Cowboys lost 3 major starters from their secondary. The Cowboys have one of their best pass rushers suspended. Terrell McClain left the Cowboys. That defense took a lot of hits, and they lost one of their starting offensive linemen in Ronald Leary. To me, the Cowboys, while other teams like the Eagles and the Giants and the Redskins did some nice things to upgrade a certain, a couple positions here and there, the Cowboys look like they just got worse.
Well, Terrell McClain, as you mentioned, Jack Crawford went to the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, they lost 4 quality defensive backs. 2 safety, J.J. Wilcox, who has gone from signing with Tampa Bay to getting traded to the Steelers. Barry Church is with Jacksonville. Brandon Carr is with Baltimore. Morris Claiborne is with the New York Jets. I know Claiborne has been that can't stay healthy type of guy. But when you have that much overhaul on one unit, and Randy, as you mentioned, Randy Gregory suspended for the year, but David Irving suspended for 4 games, a pass rusher. DeMontre Moore, who they brought in as a free agent, suspended 2 games. I've been kind of kidding along. I think they might have to call the Dallas Mavericks for some depth.
I mean, Mark Cuban is willing to loan them for the right price, right?
And that, as we know, that price will benefit Mark Cuban.
Of course it will.
Yes.
Russell Baxter joining us here, NFL Network contributor, also writer for NFL Spin Zone. You can follow him on Twitter at BaxFootballGuru. Looking overall at the NFC East, we're going to see both of these matchups tomorrow. We've been talking about the Cowboys and Redskins, the Eagles and Redskins, but the Cowboys-Giants game to me is also interesting, because I think people are assuming just because the Cowboys, the Cowboys, they're going to beat the Giants this year, right? I think we shouldn't assume that just because Odell Beckham Jr. may or may not play. We forget that the Giants did add a guy in Brandon Marshall, who I think Brandon Marshall is very motivated this season. I've heard him talk in the offseason. He seems like he is really 100% invested into this season.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it. The only problem I have with the Giants, and it's a pretty big problem, and, let's just go down the road here. You using your own words, and I agree with you, the Washington Redskins offensive line is underrated. Agreed?
Yep.
Okay, Philadelphia's offensive line. How do we feel about that?
I think it's better than the Giants.
But I mean, it's one of the better lines in the league. The
Yes.
tackle combination of Peters and Lane Johnson. Okay, Dallas's offensive line speaks for itself, even with the change. Okay, Lael Collins moves over to right tackle. Remember, he was a tackle in college. Their problem could be at left guard. Is it Jonathan Cooper? Is it Chaz Green? We'll see. Then we'll talk about the Giants' offensive line compared to so much emphasis on defense, and rightfully so, but then you look at the offensive line and the way the Giants are built, they can't run the football. In fact, they almost semi-refuse to run the football. Maybe they get something from Paul Perkins this year. I know, when he showed last year, Josh, he showed pretty well. Wayne Gallman is in there from Clemson, the fourth-round pick as well. But Eric Flowers has been, Eric Flowers has been in the weeds, okay?
Yep.
So that's a problem for them. And here's something that might surprise people. The Giants did make the playoffs last year. They swept the Cowboys. You go back to the last 5 regular. Now, I think it's Eli. Even last year without Brandon Marshall, Eli Manning, Sterling Shepard, Odell Beckham Jr. Obviously, Ben McAdoo running the show. If you go back to the last 5 regular season games for the Giants last year and add the playoff game against the Packers, do you know the Giants failed to score at least 20 points in any of those games?
I mean,
I think that might surprise them because they were 11-5. They made the playoffs. They've got Eli Manning, and yet that lack of balance that the great Mr. Miyagi talked about for years and years and years with Daniel LaRusso has come back to bite them.
Well, it's surprising because of the fact that Ben McAdoo, with his 10-foot-long play sheet that he holds in front of him, he's a former offensive coordinator, become head coach. You would think that he would be a little bit more insightful about how putting points on the board.
Well, you would think so too, but I mean, when you have a play sheet that is so big that it causes you to get a 12th man on the field penalty because it hangs over the sidelines.
Right.
Listen, Ben McAdoo, it's his first year as a head coach. We've seen a lot of great coordinators not necessarily pan out as great head coaches. We've seen some of them get off to good starts, and then it becomes a little overwhelming and so on. So, to me, the Giants are flawed because of that offensive line and the lack of a running game. And you're basically asking Eli Manning to be a one-man show. And we have seen it through history. These great seasons put up by quarterbacks, 55 touchdown passes by Peyton Manning, 50 by Brady, 49 by Peyton Manning, 48 by Dan Marino. They haven't added up to anything except MVP awards.
Yep.
Okay? And I have the Super Bowl trophies. In fact, some of those guys have gotten blown out in the Super Bowl in terms of teams because of the lack of balance. So there is no balance with the Giants right now, and that's why my pecking order in the NFC East this year, it's out there. Don't worry. You can find it. Redskins 1, Eagles 2, Cowboys 3, Giants 4.
Wow. Russell Baxter joining us here on 97.3 ESPN. A couple more questions for you before we let you go. You mentioned the Steelers earlier. I think that they are a team that is kind of sneakily upgraded. You mentioned the J.J. Wilcox addition. They made the trade for Vance McDonald to beef up the tight end. They have Martavius Bryant returning from the suspension. They signed Joe Hayden after he was cut by the Browns. I think that the Steelers are really shaping up as long as Ben stays healthy. Obviously, that's a big if out there. But if Ben stays healthy, I think this team could really have a great season, and they could be the team that when the playoffs come around, when the Patriots are in the championship game, it could be the Steelers across from them making it a battle.
Yeah, I agree. I think if there is a team in the AFC from top to bottom, it would be Pittsburgh to threaten New England. Unfortunately, I have to see it to believe it. And I know Ben didn't play in the game in Pittsburgh last year. It was Landry Jones, and New England won there. And they looked overwhelmed when they lost Le'Veon Bell in the first quarter. Tom Brady has kind of owned that defense. And I think I like the word you used, sneakily went out and upgraded. Artie Burns is a second-year player with a lot of potential, and now he gets a little, mentor in Joe Hayden. Sean Davis is a second-year strong safety from Maryland who gets a little more guidance from a J.J. Wilcox. I think one aspect about the Steelers, and this happens a lot, as you know, Josh, because we get focused on the four-man lines in the league, and sometimes the three-man defensive lines kind of get lost in the shuffle. Who's got the best defensive line, et cetera, et cetera. But Javon Hargrave in the middle, another rookie from a year ago, Stephon Tuitt, and Cameron Hayward. This might be the Steelers' best line since the Casey Hayward, Aaron Smith, Brett Kiesel days. And I think that goes a long way. And what's going to be fun to watch about them on defense this year is they're basically going to have Bud Dupree and T.J. Watt run around the field until they run out of gas. Mm-hmm. Okay? So we shall see how long that lasts. And you got James Harrison, a veteran. You got Arthur Motes. But I'm going to be watching Dupree, who, had one of the hits of the year last year in the playoff game against Matt Moore. And T.J. Watt, if you saw him in the preseason, which very interesting. The very first preseason game for the Steelers this year, first preseason game, T.J. Watt played the entire game, Josh.
Yeah. I like T.J. Watt a lot. I think he's got a chance to really make an impact for the Steelers this year as a linebacker. Russell, one more for you before we let you go, and I always appreciate the time when you come on here. I'm looking at this game between the Seahawks and the Packers. It seems early to say this, but this game could actually have something to say about home field advantage in the playoffs, because I'm looking at the addition of Sheldon Richardson for the Seahawks and the addition of Martellus Bennett for the Packers. Two teams that got some nice additions helping each side of the ball, the Seahawks defense and the Packers offense, which are strengths for each team.
I don't think it's too early to say that. Obviously it's too early to say they will meet in the NFC Championship game, okay? But it's not too early to speculate that it's a possibility. They met in the NFC title game a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. We have seen these two teams, and the home team's been able to hold serve for the most part. We saw Seattle go in there last year when everybody thought Green Bay was semi-done and get whacked 38-10. I agree with you. Green Bay delved a little more into free agency than they used to. Lance Kendricks, Martellus Bennett, Jari Evans. Mm-hmm. The Sheldon Richardson deal just makes the Seattle Seahawks scary. They're actually my pick to win the Super Bowl over New England. And, watching Seattle during the preseason, and I understand it's quote-unquote only preseason. But frankly, they look like they were in a pretty bad mood. And I think a lot of that came from the way they finished last year. No Earl Thomas. 3-3 in their last 6 games, beat the Lions in the playoffs, got whacked big time by Atlanta. Not having Earl Thomas there hurt. They went out and got some depth at the safety position. They've got Eddie Lacy. That'll be the talking point for the Week 1 game. Eddie Lacy comes back to Green Bay. Green Bay certainly capable of winning this game. I'm not saying that. But if Seattle in Week 1 can actually go into Green Bay and win, boy, that's going to catapult them in a lot of people's eyes as far as the favorite in the NFC.
Absolutely. Russell Baxter, you can follow him on Twitter at BaxFootballGuru, ProFootballGuru.com, NFL Spin Zone. You've seen him on Good Morning Football on NFL Network. Russell, always appreciate the time. Football, we got real games finally. It's exciting.
Yes, and by the way, if you don't follow me on Twitter, I have a unique set of skills that will enable me to find you and follow you. So,
Russell, always appreciate the time, my friend.
No problem.